Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back for the 203rd Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom call. We're starting out with 72 people. That's a magic number. We are glad to see everybody. We're going to be talking today about how Leonard Peltier is still in prison, for God's sakes. And we're going to have the great GREG PALAST with us, talk about the turnout or lack thereof in the 2024 presidential election. We're going to go deep, take a deep dive later on into toxic pollution, and but we're really going to deal with the nitty gritty again of getting Leonard Peltier back to his people, and of dealing with what really happened in this election, which is going to take some serious investigation and unraveling. And we have the great Clint Curtis with us, who's a real veteran of these election issues. But we are going to talk with GREG PALAST about the turnout. We're going to be opened up with the wonderful Mimi German is going to have a poem. Our poet laureate is going to have a poem for us. But I do want to start by noting that today is Beethoven's birthday. Beethoven is my guy. He was actually a great progressive. My wife asked me if he was the first of his kind as a composer, and I had to say he's the only of his kind. There's only one Beethoven, and I love his music dearly and have probably listened to tens of thousands of hours. Maybe we'll dig up his Fifth Symphony to play the da 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 opening. But Beethoven was a great progressive. He lived in Vienna and was actually a great fan of the French Revolution until Napoleon, who was the aberrant outcome of that revolution, invaded Austria, and Beethoven was really angry about that. Anybody who ever wants their spirits lifted, try the Ninth Symphony, the Eighth Symphony, the Seventh Symphony, especially the second movement of the Seventh Symphony, which I believe the fourth movement of Beethoven's Seventh Symphony is actually the root of rock and roll. That is not a popular theory, but what can I tell you? So do yourself a favor and listen in. Okay, we're going to start with the great Mimi German, our poet laureate, who's now in Portland. I don't have to worry about her being in the desert and getting attacked by. There are no rattlesnakes left in Portland, are there, except the ones in public office. So, Mimi, if you will greet our great gathering, which now has 97 people, and with your poem of the week, we will then jump in, talk about Leonard Peltier, and then about the election.
Thank you. I am in the desert.
Oh, you are in the desert?
Yes, and
Okay.
it's beautiful. It's snowy. Yeah, and there's no snakes.
Good. Thank goodness.
Yeah. So, hello to everybody. It's really great to see so many people on this show today. It's a lot of energy for Leonard Peltier, and that's great. I have a poem today called Small Tombs that I'll share with you. Small tombs. I visit the small tombs, the stones of the poor, with names inscribed in thin etch of line, where grasses seize space among the dance hall of weeds, and where sometimes pinwheels circle haphazardly off course on keeling winds. Lives lived in the cold of rooms, walls so thin, one does not wonder how the ache of poverty could sound like the ocean's roar. I read their names, their place in once a time, make up the faces of here lies so-and-so, wondering if they ever could afford to saddle down from the stirrups and graze on love.
Wow. Thank you, Mimi. As always, we do want to graze on love today. I'm glad you're safe and warm and
Thank you.
the wilds of Eastern Oregon. And I do want to express my outrage here that Leonard Peltier has not been freed. although Joe Biden's son has been. MYLA, did you want to jump in here real quick, please? MYLA
Oh,
Reason.
thank you for that beautiful poem, Mimi. And
Thank you, Mimi.
I
Yes.
I got a text back from Greg. I sent him the link, and he said he needed about 20 minutes, and he'll be happy to join us.
Okay, that's good. So let's talk now about Leonard Peltier, also Stephen Donziger. I don't know about you guys, but and this is a nonpartisan call, so it's bipartisan or whatever, or try or whatever, beyond partisan. But I was outraged when Biden pardoned his son and not Leonard Peltier. And, this man has been in prison for 50 years. There is no evidence that he ever really did what they said he did. He certainly never had anything resembling a fair or credible trial. And, we have suggested that he be remanded to his tribe. I did think about that, by the way. We had um, uh, what's the name of the indigenous guy who joins us from time to time? About a month ago, who was quite intrigued with the suggestion that Leonard be remanded to his tribe. But then it occurred to me, if he's remanded to his tribe, Trump could conceivably retake him and put him back in prison. So
Chase
That
Ironized.
Chase
yeah,
Iron Eyes. I'm so sorry, I forgot that. I'm starting to forget names now. So my next year will be my 80th birthday. So here we go. So yeah, but there's sometimes when you just are at a loss for words, and I am just so outraged that Biden has not stepped forward. Neither did, by the way, Barack Obama. Neither did Bill Clinton. They all had the opportunity to let Leonard at least have a fair trial, for God's sakes. And here he is, still in prison, and Joe Biden's son is not. Ruth Strauss, and neither is Donald Trump, for that matter. Ruth Strauss, did you want to say something? We gotta unmute
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
I agree with you, and I've called. I have the White House on speed dial, and I've called there. Somebody, I think, either on this or some other group meeting, said that we should be asking for clemency because pardoning implies guilt, and therefore we should. It's a small point. Therefore, we should term it clemency. But I also saw in the chat just now somebody posted that, quote unquote, it's alleged that he shot and killed someone. They really need to see, and I'm sure, Harvey, you'll remember that there was a film that was really good, made many years ago. I think Robert Redford
Yes,
produced it, and
right.
it really does lay out the entrapment of the FBI and even their co-opting people in the tribe about the whole thing. So if you can remember it, that person who posted that should probably watch it.
It's called Incident at Oglala.
Yeah,
And
right.
there's a fellow in it, John Trudell, who I knew, who's the first Indian rapper, indigenous rapper. And, it's just an outrageous series of events. There's also a magnificent book by Peter. Oh, God, I'm getting having trouble with his name. I knew Peter very well about Leonard's case, in the spirit of Crazy Horse. Peter Matheson was a great writer. Also wrote a book called the Snow Leopard. Peter Matheson was a fabulous writer, and he wrote this magnificent book, in the spirit of Crazy Horse, also about this case. I mean, it's just beyond gut wrenching. And so I want to say again, for those of you who are interested, I really would love to take off the next 2 weeks, but as long as Lauren's in prison, I don't feel comfortable doing that. So we will meet next week and the week after, and we're just going to have to deal with this. I mean, it's so outrageous. Tatanka, you are in your car, stationary. Thank you. I see rain on the windows. Give us, and you're the one who brought us Chase Iron Eyes. What do you have to say now about what's happening with or not happening with Leonard Peltier?
Well, I hope I come in clearly. I'm up in
You're good. You're
Sonoma.
good.
It's been raining.
Good.
Okay. So I contacted Adam Thunderface via Gomez, who we had on last week, a relation of Leonard's. And I also called Chase and texted him and said, if he can't meet with us today, we are going to be on the 23rd and the 30th. And if he could join us either of those times, either of those two people. So I'll be in touch with you about that. Meanwhile, International Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, just Google that. You've got ways of helping. And yeah, compassionate release is what they've been asking for, which does imply that they have to free him, because they did talk about that possibility of no guilt and let him go with the tribe, and anybody could take him back. And he's a proud man as well. So I think the thing to do is just completely, let's go all out until the Biden's end of term. And with the world the way it is, who knows, for whatever reason, somebody may get through to him and have him do the right thing. It just reminds me of no president doing the right thing since John Kennedy due to threats, and the true meaning of public service in putting something higher than your own security is a difficult thing, evidently, for many people to muster. And I don't want to sit in judgment of that, but this is a travesty and an injustice whose time has come. So let's just keep working.
Well, I called the White House. I sent him an email. I know somebody who works in the White House. I've been emailing her. The pain and outrage of him not being freed in the face of all this. You've got a guy about to enter the White House as president of the United States who's a rapist and has been convicted of, what is it, 32, 34 felonies. And here Leonard Peltier has never had anything remotely resembling a fair trial.
And Harvey, I have a suggestion. There was a great suggestion about a film, but we had Chase on where he took an hour of his time as he was walking the Black Hills and told us about the backstory of the FBI from a very personal point of view, because his dad's brother was one of the people murdered in the 2 years leading up to the outreach of the elders there to the American Indian movement. And he basically talks about that whole sordid episode, and that those people who engineered that went to the top of the FBI, and those people have been at the top of the FBI ever since. So that's the issue. Somebody has to really, muster the courage in office to confront those forces. But I think if there's some way of ISO that out of your call and sending that out to people, that's a real concise way to get it from Chase's mouth to our ears.
We'll see if Chase. Well, let's hope Leonard will be out by our next meeting or the meeting after. But we did get.
He will.
Julian Assange is now sitting on a beach somewhere in Australia with his family, and it's been calls like this, not this one in particular, but a whole symphony of people acting that got him out. It's that old phrase, "She who saves one life saves the whole world," and we cannot let up. I can't. I was just so sickened when he pardoned his son and doesn't care. I'm speechless almost. Mike Hirsch and then John Steiner. Mike, go ahead, please.
Yes, Sluggo, I would suggest that with the days waning before Biden leaves office, it might make sense to put together an op-ed or an open letter and get it circulated as widely as possible. Because I think the reason that the Democrats would be reticent about this is that they're constantly being attacked as quote unquote soft on crime. Now we know that this was a fabrication, that Leonard is innocent, but they don't want to be accused of that. So what we need to do is make the case that Leonard was railroaded, that he deserves to be freed, and he deserves clemency, not a pardon, as Dr. Ruth explained. But I think we need to get it to like the Progressive Magazine, the Nation Magazine, wherever we can find somebody who has a wider audience than even we have. And also, I think the Pacifica Network might be willing to set aside, some time to focus on this on all the channels and the affiliates.
And Mike,
Go ahead, Tatanka, what?
the tagline on that is, lest the Democrats be accused of soft on crime, release Leonard Peltier.
Yeah, really.
Beautiful. That's so well said. Thank you, Tatanka.
And let me tell you again, as someone who's had personal experience up close and personal with FBI infiltration, and what they can do and have done to progressive groups around the country, of course, now we have a new guy coming into the FBI. I think we should ask, as part of the cost-cutting thing that Elon Musk wants to do, are they going to merge the FBI with the KGB? That would certainly make a certain geopolitical sense. John Steiner, do you want to jump in, please, John?
I just want to say, maybe you guys know this, but 34 members of Congress wrote a letter to Biden 4 days ago, and we just put it in the chat.
Oh, very good. Well, I just don't know how it can't happen, but God help us. We have 137 people with us. It's great to see everybody today. There's a letter. Is that the letter, Steve, from the members of the Congress to the president?
Yeah, that's the letter.
Oh, good. Well, thank you. And thank you, Steve Caruso, for being such a great engineer and getting these things in. I really, really appreciate that. I can't resist. This being Beethoven's birthday, the opera Fidelio is Fidelio is the only opera that Beethoven wrote. And Fidelio is actually a woman who disguises herself as a man and goes into a prison to free her lover. It's a fantastic story, and it's it's the only opera I can actually listen to. So it's very much in keeping with the spirit of Leonard. And again, the book to read is by Peter Matheson, In the Spirit of Crazy Horse, and the movie is Incident at Ogallala. People should see it. I also would be remiss if not to mention our good friend Steve Donziger. Steve Donziger has been raped and pillaged by the legal system, which has been bought and paid for by Chevron, and has been deprived of his legal license and put through all sorts of hell. And Biden could actually pardon him and help him get his license back. And so we really want Steve Donziger practicing law, and he's in Manhattan and deserves the best possible treatment. So let's take this all very seriously. We will meet again next week, and let's hope we are celebrating Joe Biden finally doing the right thing for both Leonard Peltier and Steve Donziger. John Steiner, please.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. I mean, we know the split in the Democratic Party, shall we call it, between the corporate liberals and the conservatives, and the progressives. And there's also a race, as you guys know, for the chairman of the DNC. And it looks like there are two progressives running, including Ben Wickler of Wisconsin. And I just wonder if we might want to take some time in the next week or two to delve into that and see if there's one candidate that we would like to support, and what kind of leverage we could have in that. Mike, I don't know if you've done anything with Democrat Socialists of America, but it just seems like an issue that's up our alley.
Well, they're talking about putting Rahm Emanuel in there.
No, he has dropped out.
Oh, thank God. Talk about, well, anyway, we won't go into it. But so Ben Weichler has been on these calls.
Well, we may want to have him on again while he's running.
Okay. And who else is there? Who else is running?
I think his name is Ken Martin from Minnesota. Keith Ellison obviously is supporting him, but those two seem to be the two progressives, and there are several moderates. I sent an email out this morning to some of you about it, but maybe it's also a conversation we could have offline.
Well, it's a big one. It's important. So we'll meet again next week and we'll talk about this. It's a very big deal. Carla Sand, you wanted to say something? You're in Minnesota, right, Carla?
I do want to say something about the Ken Martin and the guy from Wisconsin for the DNC. If and when we would ever decide we want to endorse or support somebody, we need to know what their progressive issues have ever been. I would question Ken Martin time and time again from Minnesota that he may be a neoliberal, but I do not think he's a progressive. But you need to ask that.
Thank you,
That's
Carla.
my one concern.
Well, the one thing we do know is since he's from Minnesota, he must be nice. But to be honest,
That is even questionable.
okay. Actually, I spent a lot of time fighting the nuclear plant at Prairie Island in Minnesota. I did meet a lot of Minnesotans who were not particularly nice. So we'll take that advisement. But I will remind people we did have Ben Wickler on, and we also have had, of course, Keith Ellison, who should have been the head of the Democratic Party. And we'd be in a very different world now if Keith Ellison had been head of the Democratic Party. MYLA RESON, please, MYLA.
Well, I just wanted to say I was watching the Progressive Democrats of America town hall on YouTube after the fact, and Alan Minsky did talk about the two candidates, and PDA will be vetting them. Maybe we can get Alan on to talk as well. But I agree with whoever suggested that we try to get Ben Wickler on. I think that he may be the most progressive of the two, but it'd be great to talk to them. Thank you.
Right. That's a very good idea. I can't resist also saying this, Kamala Harris continues to be vice president of the United States and was a candidate for president who had, a saturation media coverage and became a national leader in many ways and has disappeared. And here we have all this mishigas going on with a new administration coming in, and we're desperately looking for leaders to stand up to Trump. The head of the FBI just walked out the door. I mean, he's about to put somebody in as head of the FBI, who he's basically a Soviet apparatchik. And the FBI, which reaches into the deepest corners of American life, is about to be turned into the personal instrument of the President of the United States. Where is the current vice president for whom, so many people raised so much money and went to bat? I happen to believe, by the way, based on experience in 2000 with Greg Palast and 2004 with Bob Fitrakis and watching 2016, we didn't really get a clear view, but I do not believe that Donald Trump was legitimately elected. And those are things we're going to talk about. It is a nonpartisan question. We're also going to have to ask ourselves, by the way, and we can see this train coming, that the incoming administration intends to attack nonprofits and the whole question of nonprofit status. Now, we have been raising our money primarily from one source, and many of you who have contributed, we appreciate that. And it's been nonprofit. My suspicion is that the incoming president of the United States is going to basically say that anybody who attacks him personally or questions his leadership or his policies will be subject to losing their nonprofit status. Now, think about that for a minute. And I'm not alone, hardly alone in that opinion. And that will strike at the core of, many, many activist organizations across the land. What happens if the federal government, if the Internal Revenue Service interprets any questioning of any policies or the person of the President of the United States and wants to void their nonprofit status? Think about that. That will affect us directly. I'm not sure that we should proceed with nonprofit funding. It may be that we just become a C4. Is that right, Mike Hirsch? Is that what PDA is? or some kind of situation where we have to say that we're not nonprofit. We have to, that's something to really look at, and we're all going to have to consider. I'm sure everybody on this call makes tax deductible contributions to organizations that may be inclined to question some of the things going forward. For example, if Robert Kennedy becomes head of HEW, will it be nonpartisan to question his stance on vaccinations? There you go. I mean, here's one for you. The American Revolution, counted on me to get an obscure historical reference here. The American Revolution was won by George Washington inoculating his troops. This happened. George Washington, when he was a younger guy, had smallpox. His face was terribly pocked, and he survived it. And he was extremely sensitive to the issue of inoculation. Inoculation had been introduced to the North American white community by a black slave in Puritan Boston. The smallpox periodically ravaged New England, and there was a terrible epidemic, many of them. And this slave came from an African community where they inoculated people. What they did, sorry to make you sick, but when there was a pustule of smallpox, they would take a needle and they would take a small piece and inject somebody, and then you would get the symptoms of the smallpox and a small dose of the disease and develop immunity. And it did kill people, by the way. There were instances where inoculation killed people. But the consensus in Puritan Boston in the 1630s and 40s was that inoculation did save many, many people, and that Boston would have been wiped out by smallpox had it not, and by the way, malaria, had it not been for vaccination. Now, if Bobby becomes head of HEW, is that a partisan thing to say? Is the Internal Revenue Service say that we could lose our 501c3 by advocating a position or having a discussion that contradicts official policy? That's a very, very big question. And I know it sounds theoretical, but after January 20th, not much is going to be theoretical anymore in this country. So that's food for thought up there, I hope. I will also point out that Bobby Kennedy signed the introduction to my book, Solartopia, in 2006, which advocates for a totally green-powered Earth. And I hope that if he becomes HEW secretary, that he will extend that the power of that office to advocating for a 100% renewable planet, and especially, and I have to raise this, especially for a national study of the health impacts of low-level radiation at nuclear power plants. This has never been done by the federal government. We have 90-plus atomic reactors. At one point, we had more than 100 operating in the United States of America. There is very significant medical evidence that the radiation from these atomic reactors has harmed people in the neighborhood. But there has never been a federal study, an epidemiological study. Teddy Kennedy, Bobby's uncle, did advocate for this, but it never happened. And as someone who went into 3 Mile Island 9 months after the accident, I can guarantee, and they never did a study either, by the way. I can guarantee you that radiation from nuclear power plants is a health hazard. So let's see if the new HEW secretary will get into that. Mike Hirsch, I want to welcome Jerry Ashton. Jerry, I'll give you a minute or two to say hi to everybody once Mike is done. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I wanted to call your attention to Jerry and also announce that a good friend of mine, Pat Alder, is going to be here at 6 to give us a presentation on environmental hazards, and also our good friend Rob Kall. citizen journalist, is here as well.
Oh, good.
So we've got quite an audience and quite a lot of terrific participants as always.
And we have 136 people with us. Jerry Ashton, do you want to say hi? You've been with us a few times before. Jerry Ashton, everybody, if you're not familiar with him, started RIP Medical Debt, which has amazingly enough retired or helped retire many, many billions of dollars in medical debt, and Jerry is now focused on the medical debt of veterans. Do you want to give us a quick rundown, Jerry, and throw your contact in the and those of you who came for Greg Palast, he is imminent in showing up, but we'll give Jerry a minute or two here just to say hi. Go ahead, Jerry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Solartopia.
You're welcome.
Yes, in 2014 started a charity called RIP Medical Debt with the intention of raising money, going to the debt market, and purchasing that debt for pennies on the dollar. First couple of years, we starved to death. Me and a fellow bill collector, we were both out of the collections industry, but we kind of had a change of heart. So all of a sudden we got noticed, and we started raising a lot more money. And as of this month, we have abolished over almost $15 billion worth of debt for about nearing 10 million Americans. So that's called being in the right place at the right time with the right subject, because 10 years ago when we started it, nobody talked about medical debt. Now, jumping forward to where we are now, and thank you for allowing me to reveal my newest 501c3 private foundation called End Veteran Debt. I'll put the website in chat so people can have a chance to check it out. But End Veteran Debt, I would be our job is to raise money to get rid of all forms of debt oppressing veterans. Payday loan debt, car note debt, high interest rate credit cards, phonies, school systems. We want to get our veterans out from underneath that burden. But it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not, if I were so subversive as a charity called End Veteran Debt, to be denied by the IRS the right to be a charity if I should misspoke myself about Mr. Trump.
Okay. Well, we again, it's a very serious issue. And when you say you've retired, was it 15 billion? That's a billion with a B.
With a B.
Medical debt. So there you go. 10 million Americans. And Jerry, we hope you can continue your great work. Please do once again put your link in the chat. We really appreciate it. And
by the way, you and I are going to talk offline about the fact how we're going to do a co-fundraising in 2025 to be able to, each of us, to abolish $1 million of veteran debt in honor of Debt Day.
Okay, what's Debt Day?
Well, have you ever heard of June 6, 1944?
Yeah, that's that's Normandy.
Called D-Day, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Well, fast forward 80 years, the current veterans who come home don't get exactly the same treatment. In fact, the reason we have to get rid of debt is to get rid of a social determinant of suicide. So all about that at some future time, because I see you have a guest coming on. So I'll put all my stuff in the box.
Well, you're a guest. We're glad to have you. We do hope your 501c3 status does not get attacked, and keep up your great work, Jerry Ashton. Folks, you should be in touch with Jerry. He's a brilliant guy, and his work has been astounding. Really, really great. Steve Caruso, our great engineer. Did you want to jump in here?
Yes, the national discussion is the latest shooting of the United Healthcare person, and it would be remiss to mention that this inflated debt that we all handle with healthcare as a nation, because the corporations have us over a barrel, is a sign that we have too much debt as slaves to that system, and we need Medicare for all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and that's going to be a really interesting issue when it comes, Trump in office. And I have to point out that the Democrats, have failed.
You got to unmute, Harvey.
All right, Bernie Sanders has been, arguing for God knows how long that we should have universal health care. Many or most other industrial nations have universal health care, including the country to the north. There are problems here and there, but the idea that you could possibly in this country, as wealthy as it is, I mean, do we live in a country where only billionaires can get their health taken care of? Is that where we're headed? It's really a nightmare. So we have to continue to push on that. Let's see. I wanted to talk to Clint Curtis. Clint, are you with us still? Clint Curtis? Clint Curtis is one of the great veterans of the election protection movement. I will say, since we are going to meet the next 2 weeks, we do want to get our heads around what really happened in this election. There is no doubt that many people, as Greg will tell us, that many people were disenfranchised, and Clint Curtis has been opening our eyes for decades now about other things that have gone on with the vote counts.
Clint is gone. He just left 2 seconds
Okay.
ago.
Okay. We don't. I'm sorry. I also wanted to raise the issue of in energy. Carla Sand has raised this as well. One of the things that has concerned us as well in these nominees is the Secretary of Energy. And the Secretary of Energy, whose name gratefully escapes me, and I will not try to remember it, is an advocate of fossil fuels. It's mind-boggling in this day and age that anybody could continue to advocate burning more fossil fuels. But this guy that Trump wants to put in as head of Secretary of Energy is advocating that. And one of the great failures, people talk a lot about the Inflation Reduction Act and the many hundreds of billions of dollars that Biden and company have gratefully put in to renewable energy, and we're deeply grateful for that. But they've also put billions of dollars earmarked for a nuclear power. And I have to say that nuclear continues to get worse. We have 92 or 93 reactors in this country that are like. Greg is calling me. Hold on one sec. Greg, we're waiting for you, bro. Okay, you were sent the link, but we'll send it again. Steve, can you send Greg Palast the link, please? And whoever has Greg's.
Harvey, I just texted him again with the link. I've sent it twice.
Okay, it was texted to you, Greg?
From MYLA.
From MYLA. And also sent to you. I can email it again. Okay, you got it? Thank you. So my concern now is I actually have, and maybe some of you have seen it, Donald Trump has actually made negative comments about nuclear power. Hard to believe. So we'll see what happens. We will see if the Trump administration, which is everybody knows is extremely pro fossil fuel, is going to follow through and continue to be, as Biden has been, pro nuclear. That's going to be a big test. I also will say that Kamala Harris, who has disappeared entirely, there is talk about her running for governor of California. And my wife just responded by saying, "Oh God." But the point is, we have been betrayed in California by Gavin Newsom, who signed a bill, a brilliant piece of work, a phase-out plan to take out the Diablo Canyon reactors and go 100% renewable in California, which we could do very easily and very cheaply. And he's betrayed us. Not only did he sign that bill and drop out and kill it, but he's also done a similar thing with a place called Aliso Canyon, which is north of LA, and where there's been terrible pollution from a gas storage facility. And Gavin Newsom again signed a deal to phase that place out and has betrayed us. And Gavin Newsom very clearly is going to be running for president of the United States for 2028, if in fact we have elections. And I got to tell you that if Kamala Harris follows in his footsteps in running for governor of California, we are just going to have to fight her tooth and nail. I've been quite amazed at her disappearance, complete disappearance. She's still vice president, for God's sakes, and her failure to say anything about any of these appointments and any of the procedures of the incoming Trump administration. It's astounding to me that someone who could be so totally in the public eye could completely disappear like this. But there it is. Mike Hurst, did you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, that's another thing we need to get Alan Minsky to report on. Alan and several other organization leaders have been working to shut down that incredibly dangerous liquid natural gas facility. And it's really, we can't really expect that much from our government, apparently, but I don't think it's too much to ask them to not risk our lives on a widespread basis, on a daily basis. I mean, if they're willing to risk our lives this way, then we definitely need to fire them and get some people who give two craps about the human beings. But I see we have our guest of honor, Greg Palast. So
yeah,
I'll
we
wrap
do
up
have
now.
Greg. He's wearing his signature fedora yarmulke, and we have managed to maintain over the years a legitimate bipartisan status in that we get no matter what we do, no matter how we work for democracy, we invariably get stabbed in the back by the Democrats. And this is no exception here. Greg Palast, is really the godfather of the election protection movement since 2000, when he pointed out that Jeb Bush, the governor of Florida, had stripped the voter rolls. When Paul Krasner, Greg, was credited with being the godfather of the Yippie movement, he demanded a paternity test. And in your case, we have clear proof that you did this in Florida 2000. You were a big help in Ohio 2004. And now you have this movie, Vigilantes Inc., which has been warning people for quite a while of the stripping of the voter rolls, especially in Georgia. We've raised a number of issues about the 2024 election. We have with us 148 people, and we are live online, and will be rebroadcast on Progressive Radio Network Thursday night. What do you think? And we have Clint Curtis is left. But what do you think now, Greg Palast, about this potential stripping of the voter rolls in 2024? How many people were bumped, and did it have an impact?
Yeah. Let me give you some numbers. And this is from a book called Billionaires and Ballot Bandits, which is on the Times bestseller list. I was the writer. And let me give you some numbers. 700 in this from the 2008 election, 767,023 provisional ballots were cast and not counted. 1,451,116 ballots were spoiled, not counted. 136,000 absentee ballots were not counted. 2,383,587 voters had their registrations rejected. 491,952 voters registered were wrongly purged from the voter rolls. 320,000 properly registered voters were simply turned away from the polls when they try to vote, mostly for not having acceptable voter IDs. That's what happened in 8.
Were those people turned away of the African American persuasion?
One thing to know. Okay, so now I'm glad you're asking about going through the numbers. For those who know me, Greg Palast. I'm a forensic economist. I taught statistics at Indiana University. Numbers are what I do. And if there are no numbers, I don't do it. I'm an investigative reporter. You can tell by my hat. You've seen me on Democracy Now! Or in Rolling Stone or on BBC television, where I was the chief investigative reporter for BBC for a while. And so if I haven't investigated it, I don't report it. Yes, there's a big issue that we have to address. There is a massive number of voters of color who were turned away from the polls, whose votes got rejected, etc. I have zero doubt. I'm going through the numbers right now, and one great amazing frustration is that it used to be that I could get the numbers from the secretaries of state's offices, and now they're all hidden. No one is releasing the actual numbers from I'm telling you, no one is actually releasing the voter data, how many ballots were counted, how many ballots were rejected. Because look, the nasty little secret of American democracy is that we don't count all the votes and we don't let all legal voters vote. That's the issue. So we have to look at these numbers. When I was with BBC and we reported the election results in Britain, we would say, here in this MP's district, you had 92,000 votes for the Tories, and you had 79,000 votes for Labor. And we would also report the votes that were counted. We'd say, 19 votes were spoiled where we couldn't read, they were deliberately destroyed, or we could not read the voter's choice. In America, we don't do that. Because if we had to report the number of votes that are not counted, ballots rejected, voters kicked out of the polling station, it's in the millions. Now, if it were random, it wouldn't mean a damn thing, but it's not random at all. If you are black, and this is again from the federal government, which did an analysis, the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, if you are black, the chance that your ballot will be disqualified for some technical reason is 700% higher than if you're white. Let's talk about provisional ballots, which I don't see discussed by anyone, right or left. 4 years ago, we had 10 million people shunted to provisional ballots. That is, someone challenged their vote, someone a question, whatever, their address, and they were shunted to a provisional ballot. What is a provisional ballot? It's a back of the bus ballot. If you're black, Hispanic, or Asian American, the chance you will be shoved to a provisional ballot is 300% higher than if you're white. Now, what happened to those ballots? There were 10 million, not 10,000, 10 fucking million ballots. Provisional. Of those, 2.7 million ballots. This is from the Elections Assistance Commission, the federal agency which tracks it. 2.7 million ballots were disqualified. Now look at Trump's victory margins. And again, 300% more likely if you're a voter of color than if you're white to get a provisional ballot, and then 700% higher to not have it counted. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, in 2016, I did the arithmetic. Hillary Clinton's victory was in those dumpsters, in those provisional ballot dumpsters. What about this year? I can't tell you, because I don't have a single state, not one of the swing states, that will give me the total count of provisional ballots and how many were rejected. Now, here's the interesting thing. The horrifying thing. If you cast a ballot and you don't have the right to vote, that's a felony crime. So how many of these 2.7 million ballots from last time, how many of those voters were arrested for attempting to cast an illegal ballot? The answer is zero, none, because none of them were illegal voters, not one. Those ballots should have been counted. In the old days, in the good old days when we had a Supreme Court that hadn't shifted its black robes to white robes, the voters' intent mattered. And in 2000, I was the reporter who uncovered in the Bush versus Gore campaign that 58,000 black men were removed from the voter rolls of Florida, supposedly as convicts and ex-cons who can't vote. Not one, zero. I went to the Attorney General of Florida. I said, how many of these 58,000 illegal voters? And by the way, if you're an ex-con in Florida and you try to vote, that's a felony crime. You go right back to jail. So I said, how many of the 58,000 were illegal voters? The answer is none. Not one. And the game has continued. And
didn't
visual
the
ballots, spoiled ballots, etc. So, but one thing we have to discuss right now is the racism within the left-wing white community. I got to talk to you guys straight. If you're black, you'll get a provisional ballot. If you're a voter of color, you're going to get a provisional ballot. They won't be counted. There's spoiled ballots. That is ballots that they say can't be counted. There were 1.5 million in 2000. I can tell you provisional ballots this time was not 10 million. It was 20 million. No question. Ballots spoiled. That is ballots that they say can't be read because they can't be read in the voting machine. Absentee ballots. Black people, and since the 2000 election, have been voting in the majority, mailing in their ballots. And according to MIT, almost a third of those ballots never get counted. A third. I mean, I have a different number. I say 1 in 7 absentee ballots don't get counted. But do you know how many millions that is? It's not just anyone's ballot. The chance your ballot won't be counted if you mail in an absentee ballot or put it in, go into early voting, put it in Dropbox, again, is 700% higher if you're black than if you're white. So what's happening is we have a massive issue, which we politely call vote suppression. And as I said in a lecture I just gave at Harvard with Latasha Brown, who teaches there, and I was lecturing at Harvard about vote suppression. Someone asked me, well, what is the definition of vote suppression? I said, it's fucking black people out there vote. That's what it's about. I said, can I say that at Harvard? They said, you just did. So here's the deal. It looks like, but I don't have the final numbers, and I really hate to report unless I've got the numbers. It looks like Trump, if you eliminated all these politely called vote suppression, ballot destroying measures, Trump lost. I can tell you 1,000% certain that the GOP did not win Congress. Those elections were clearly way within the bounds of the number of voters of color removed from those key. And I was just looking at the numbers 2 nights ago with the key congressional races. They didn't win the U.S. Congress. We got some discussion in Pennsylvania about how the GOP blocked provisional ballots or ballots that came in before Election Day, but they didn't have a time stamp on the envelope. And by the way, the one reason why you don't have timestamps on envelopes is that in a lot of counties, they see when a ballot comes in, it goes into a box for all the ballots, which is sent to because they don't need to put it through the machines. They know exactly what they are. And they're delivered before Election Day. Before Election Day, they say, oh, well, we don't know if these are legal ballots because they don't have a date stamp on them. We got them physically before Election Day. And we have this continuing problem. And I'll give you one more. I want you to watch the film Vigilantes, Inc. Go to gregpalast.com. Leonardo DiCaprio, his dad's the executive producer. Leonardo DiCaprio with Martin Sheen, narrated by Rosario Dawson. You can't do worse than that. Watch the film Vigilantes, Inc., America's New Vote Suppression Hitmen. And you will see that this election, which we've never had before, 2 million voters had their right to vote challenged. This is basically an unreported story. By the group True the Vote was organizing this. They are the group that came up with this this berserker film 2000 Mules, saying that black people are stuffing ballot boxes illegally. It was horseshit, and they've actually withdrawn the distribution of that film, but it doesn't matter. They ended up getting in 2000, they got 88 GOP operatives to challenge black voters. This year they had 40,000. I want to repeat that: 40,000 vigilantes who said these are not government officials who challenge your vote under state old Jim Crow laws. And the total number of challenge were over 2 million. Most of those people were shunted to provisional ballots, including, for example, we have on camera Major Gamaliel Turner, career military officer, Georgian, who was assigned to work in California, and he lost his vote because they said that he didn't live in Georgia. Well, he's a soldier assigned to California. He doesn't lose his. Believe it or not, black soldiers are allowed to vote, even if they've been assigned to another military base. So this is what's happened this election, but I want to be very clear. I just told you about provisional ballots, spoiled ballots, voters challenged, voters purged. I've been working on this for decades. What I haven't found in one single case ever, votes changed through computers or computer electronics. I know that there's like this rumor going around that Elon Musk had control of the vote tabulating machines. It was horseshit when Donald Trump brought it up 4 years ago, and it's horseshit now. And it's even worse now, because if you're talking about voting machine tabulators, then I can tell you right now, I don't have to guess, you're a white voter, middle-class voter who's concerned about their vote, and you couldn't give a fuck about what happened to the black people who lost their vote. So this is about apartheid in the voting rights movement. And I know a lot of you white people want to talk about computers, but you don't have any fucking evidence. It's false, it's wrong, and it discredits everything we do by joining in with Donald Trump's crazy shit about computers. Cut it out. It doesn't exist. We have to talk about what's happened to voters of color: purges, votes disqualified, vigilante challenges, provisional ballots knocked out, mail-in ballots disqualified. That's the real thing. That's what happens to voters of color. And if you get off that subject, then you're a fucking racist. And that's the fucking truth. There you are. Thank you.
Okay, Ruth Strauss, please. Ruth, raise your hand for Greg. Let me unmute you.
Okay, great. Hey, Greg, we
Hi.
have a lot of people on this call that probably have not been here before, because the number, even though Harvey is, great and a Pied Piper and a great leader, we have other people on today by the numbers, and everybody must see Vigilantes. I mean,
Thank you.
Not only is it fantastic, it's very funny. At the same time, very illuminating, lots of facts. And the bonus is, when you're shocked, but you haven't had time to write something down, you can go back and write down the facts that Greg has carefully researched. Okay, so end of that. But
thank you. And by the way, you can get thank you, Leonardo DiCaprio, for making the film free. To anyone, you can watch it online. Just go to gregpalast.com. That's GREGPALAST, gregpalast.com. I think in the right column you can
I had one thing I wanted to ask Greg.
Sure.
I mean, we are living in a Kafka-esque, situation, but I mean, is there any way to compel this through state attorney generals? Or, I mean, obviously the Supreme Court isn't going to do F, but what about, an election commission? Or I'm just wondering, I know you're very bright, and so I'm sure you thought it all out. Freedom of information. Isn't there some way to compel this? That's my question.
You mean compel, bring out the truth? Well, it's interesting.
Compel, getting the vote totals that you've talked about.
Yeah, I mean, it's really serious. it's been more than a month. And I know people are saying, Greg, what's the story on the election? Can you write about it? And I said, here's my problem. I'm literally not getting the elections numbers that used to be available. We should know how many people were shunted to provisional ballots and how many were counted. Georgia told me how many were counted. They didn't say how many were rejected, which are probably a couple 100,000 from prior elections. I'm not getting from Wisconsin or Michigan the final totals. These boards are withholding all this number. How many votes were cast but then not counted? How many ballots were supposedly arrived late, mail-in ballots? How many mail-in ballots were rejected because they supposedly didn't have the proper postage, or someone challenged their signature? This is one of the things I love, when you see a couple 100,000 votes challenged for a questionable signature. These are not specialists in signature fraud. These are just, and I have to say, I'm not trying to be partisan, but almost every challenge, in fact, every single vigilante challenger, no exception in Georgia, was a GOP official. I'm not being partisan about it. Every single one was a Republican official who challenged someone else's right to vote, saying, oh, they don't really live in Georgia or whatever. Massive. 2 million challenges. 2 million. This is not maybe. This is actual. 2 million voters were challenged. All of those challenges were from the Republican acolytes. Almost all the people challenged were voters of color. This is a Jim Crow. We just had a massive Jim Crow election. Now, in 2000, I had the U.S. Civil Rights Commission review my information. They said I was right, that people were illegally removed from the voter rolls of Florida as felons when their only crime was voting while black. I usually get this information from the states. I just don't have it. No one's enforcing it. No one cares. And by the way, the Democratic Party, you have the, cognitively impaired people like Joe Biden, who says that anyone who challenges the vote totals in America is undermining democracy. I thought stealing votes and stopping votes, black people's votes from being counted, I thought that was the attack on democracy. But, what can I do? I'm not cognitively impaired, so I don't see the logic.
Let's go to Mike Hirsch real quick, and then Charlotte and Elena and LYNN FEINERMAN. Greg, you got quite a following here. Mike, did you want to say something before we go to Charlotte?
Thanks, Sluggo. 20 years ago, not going to start singing Sergeant Pepper's, but 20 years ago, we had a very courageous congressperson, John Conyers, sat down with us in Ohio, and we took testimony, and we had remote hearings under the auspices of Mr. Conyers. I think what we need to do is prevail upon a similarly courageous member of Congress and do the same thing again. I think we need to demand to know why this is routinely happening, and it's happening worse and worse each time.
Right.
Greg, thank you so much for reporting this. You've reported that poor people, especially poor people of color, routinely by the millions have their votes thrown in the garbage can. And I do understand that some people are kind of computer nerds and are very focused on vote flipping and rigging and fraction magic and all that. But that is not really the main event. The main event is the wholesale Jim Crow election voting suppression that's been going on since they had the poll taxes and unfair tests for people of color. They've just figured out how to do it in a more and more sneaky way. Right. And whoever's unmuting, please don't do that if you could. It's pretty distracting. But anyway, getting back to my point, let's draft a courageous member of Congress to take this on their shoulders. And Jerry Ashton just said that AOC fell short in her effort to be chair, or not chair, but ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. Maybe she would be willing to take this on. And
well, somebody's got to.
Well, that's some oversight that we can't afford to overlook.
In 2004, thanks to Greg's work and Bob Fitrakis and others, those of us in Ohio, we had a meeting in the bowels of the Congress. I sat next to Bernie Sanders, and and we explained all of this. This has been going on since 2000, at least. Well, it's been going on since 1787, but we explained all this in 2004 to John Kerry. Same, I mean, it's deja vu all over again here. And he said very interesting and went windsurfing. Maybe Kamala is also windsurfing. I don't know, but it's ridiculous that this keeps happening. Thank you, Mike. Charlotte Dennett, and then Elena, and then Lynn. Are you unmuted, Charlotte? I'm getting you here. Oh God, this is the most frustrating part of these calls, is getting people unmuted.
Click
I
on
don't
the
know.
left side.
What?
Charlotte,
Go ahead.
Oh, there you go.
here she comes.
Mike,
Okay.
all right. Yeah, I have to go off to a meeting in the city of Burlington to get a resolution for the March elections on creating Burlington as an anti-apartheid city. This is a resolution that is in favor of the people of Gaza. And Greg, you know that I've very much supported your work. I've written about it in Counterpunch, but I'm astonished to find out that you've gone around bad-mouthing me to people because
Well,
of my
Charlotte,
work on Gaza.
Charlotte, let's do this. You and Greg can do this off camera if you don't mind. We
I
appreciate.
don't even know what the hell you've written on Gaza, and I
Okay.
couldn't give a fuck less.
Then I'd rather, Charlotte, let's do this offline if you don't mind. If you'll email me what your gripe is with Greg, which is perfectly fine, I will send
I
it.
have never written about Gaza, and I don't know what
Okay.
Charlotte is saying about Gaza, and I don't
Okay.
care. We're
Thank
talking
you,
about
Charlotte.
elections.
Thank you.
Let's stay to
Let's
the
stick with
subject.
elections. Elena, thank you. Charlotte, I look forward to your note to Greg. Elena, and then LYNN FEINERMAN, and then Donald Smith. Go ahead, Elena.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, here's my question. The narrative goes that working class, people of color, and Latinos are turning away from Democrats. Do you agree with this statement, or is it erroneous due to the apparent fact of voter suppression, rampant voter suppression? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question. I think that there are two things. One, as Leonardo DiCaprio wrote on Instagram, vote suppression is real. Now, here's the problem, and it involves millions of people whose votes have been canceled almost entirely. These are voters of color. Does that mean that there wasn't a shift? Well, that there definitely was a shift. No question. You can't get away from it, especially Hispanic. The big shift was actually the Hispanic male vote, and more importantly, the white young male vote, which massively moved to Trump. Now, I was at these Trump rallies, and which are pretty scary, by the way, because they had guns and they're promoting. They're saying if Trump doesn't win, we're going out there with our guns, with our AR-15s. But there's no question that there was a great resentment over things like what people see as the opening of the borders. Like when I was on stations, Wisconsin and Michigan, a lot of African American media people talking about the massive amount of money paid to support people who've come over the border. It was brilliant of the Republicans to ship 500,000 people to sanctuary cities. And we can't ignore the fact that people are just saying this is a threat to us. Now, whether that's true or false, that's a different issue. But we have to recognize that there was a massive shift, and the Democrats thought that Hispanic people would want easier immigration. They don't. They're no different than any other Americans. They want to close the door. We're a nation of immigrants, but everyone wants to close the door behind them. So we just have to recognize that there is a shift. in demographics, a shift in especially with young men, young white men. But that doesn't mean that there wasn't massive vote suppression. Did it make the difference? I'm still looking at the numbers. I think it's really, really close. I don't think Trump would have been elected without vote suppression. Certainly, Republican Congress would not have happened except for suppression of the vote. And
Well,
we
that's
got
the
to deal with
key
it.
assertion here. That's the key assertion that's being made, and that's something we have to grapple with. I mean, it's a monumental statement. If you're saying that Donald Trump, who by official vote counts became president with a margin of less than 3 million votes in the closest percentage election since 1960, if you're saying that suppression of voters of color made the difference, that's not something you just sort of pass over, even if you put the blood of lambs on your door. Let's go to Lynn Feinerman. We have 147 people with us. Lynn, go ahead, and then Donald Smith. Anybody else want to get in? We're going to switch topics at 6:30. So let's keep Greg here for the next 20 minutes. Go ahead, Lynn.
Yeah, a number of things. I wanna respond to and kind of look at Greg's rage. I feel the same thing, and I feel it about for the same reasons. I mean, I would add some things. I'm sure that Louis DeJoy had operative infiltrators to throw away massive amounts of votes that came in by mail.
Let's clarify. Louis DeJoy is the horrific head of the Postal Service that after 4 years, Joe Biden didn't get rid of him. And it's utterly destroyed the Postal Service.
Yeah.
And now they're talking about privatizing it. And he's still there. Where's Joe Biden been for 4 years on the Postal Service?
Let me
Good point,
continue.
Lynn. Yes, go ahead, Lynn. Very good point.
Thank you. I want to talk to the rage, though. You know, I had a meeting, and I know you're angry at white liberals and, you know, white liberal males probably in particular, but I had a meeting with a bunch of young white women over just happened to over the weekend, and they were so furious about the election. They were so frightened. They were so much in the corner of Mangione, who Luigi Mangione, who went and offed the healthcare CEO. And they said that for the first time in their life, they had been nonviolent protesters for decades. And for the first time in their lives, they were thinking about taking target practice. They were thinking about getting guns. They were thinking about giving up nonviolence. What I'm trying to get at here is that there is a level, you know, it's like the little creeps on the, you know, like Rittenhouse who parade their guns. But the entire nation is on the cusp of a kind of rage that I think we're not really looking at, and that we may be able to tap in some way. Because, you know, while Antifa came out and tried to, you know, counter them, fight them, they were a small group. I think we're looking at, you know, the entire nation being outraged by the election, by the incredible extortion, extraction, and ruination that's happening in this country, and that will continue with this worldwide.
Lost
You're
muted. Sorry, you got muted somehow. Greg, go ahead. I'm sorry, Lynn. There. Okay. Greg?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm nonviolent. I'm not Gandhi. I'm not Martin Luther King. But I do know this, having been to those Trump rallies and seen the guns, if we want to start picking up guns, we're going to get our heads blown off. We will lose. Okay. So the minute you start talking about violence, you better be ready. You better be ready for it. And we aren't. And yeah. So what's going to happen?
I'm
in
not
United Healthcare?
advocating it.
But
I'm not
no,
advocating.
I didn't say that. But you're talking about a rage that's out there now. What would be nice? We need to have we need to restore the voting rights movement. And when I want to go back to something I said at the beginning of this discussion about LaJoy and the post office. Now, in my film Vigilantes Inc., and I'm going to demand you watch it since it's free anyway. You can stream it for free at GREG right? But the hero of that film, Major Gamaliel Turner, who lost his vote to a vigilante vote challenger. Well, guess what? He lost another vote because they said his ballot did not arrive in Georgia in time to be counted for the election. And I got to tell you, I have photographs of Major Turner filling out his ballot, because what he does is he documents his own ballot, but he's also training young people in the military. Here's how you fill out your ballot. So he's doing a whole training session. Here's how you fill out your ballot. You have to do it in time, etc. He literally shows himself filling out the ballot and posting it at the post office, and they still said it was late. It was really simple. They know who's voting. They know whose vote is to be thrown out. How did his vote come in late? It was sent more than a week in advance to Georgia. What'd they do? Take the Pony Express? So again, this is what, but it's not just anyone's vote that gets thrown in the garbage. Again, it's 700% more likely you'll have your vote disqualified for these cockamamie reasons. Late receiver, postage due. You signed your ballot with a middle initial, but in Georgia, if you signed with a middle initial and you didn't register with a middle initial in your signature, your vote doesn't count. But who challenges these votes? They don't challenge white voters. They challenge black voters. And that's the issue for me. It is Jim Crow. It's just that it's been, as the major would say, it's just been updated.
Yeah. Okay, Lynn, are you good? Thank you for that, LYNN FEINERMAN. Very quickly, and then we're going to go to Donald Smith.
Okay, hi. So, Greg,
all right, we'll go back to you, Lynn. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I just want to, I hear you saying, let's have a voting rights movement and all that. It makes my skin crawl and my stomach turn over, because we are in such an emergent situation. And I guess I'm just putting it out there because I just want to find a way to put a wedge in that's going to topple these shits. Excuse my French,
Yeah, well, we have a very large French audience, so it's okay. We have 145 people with us, Greg. Donald Smith,
Donald.
go ahead. Anybody else want to chime in? Raise your hand. We're going to shift gears at the half hour in the fourth quarter here. Go ahead, Don.
One thing I don't understand, Greg, is why you accuse people who believe or who wonder if there was computer fraud of being racist. It's possible to both believe there was racist suppression and to think there is computer fraud. I don't see that those people are racist at all. They just think there's another way that fraud happened. I have no idea if it's the case, but what is your evidence that these people are racist? And you seem like you're accusing a lot of us of being racist. I mean, the people here, my impression is that everybody here is very much for, rights for minorities. So I don't know where, I was confused about where your rage came from, and it seemed misdirected to me. I mean, because you could support both. You could believe.
Is there a black person about the 145 people here that I can speak with?
I'm 1% North African, but that doesn't matter too much at this point.
All right. Yeah. The answer is white people care about white votes. They don't care about what we call vote suppression. And so what happens is that we spend our time, white people spend their time looking for reasons to why their vote didn't count. And so you come up with complete fantasy nonsense about voting machines. It was discredited when Trump did it 4 years ago. It's discredited now. And there's no basis, zero, none.
That could be.
So, why I call it racist is because it ignores all these people say this is how the race was stolen. Somehow Elon Musk got a hold of the vote tabulating machines, which didn't happen. Those things are not connected to the internet. It's complete nonsense. If you read my latest article, it's about Elon Musk, batteries not included. You'll see I totally despise Mr. Musk. He is the worst new American oligarch, but he didn't fix this election except through his money, $250 million. So I'm telling you right now that black people, we have absolute stone cold numerical absolute evidence of vote fraud against black people, preventing their votes from being counted, purged from the voter rolls. Martin Luther King's 92-year-old cousin, I was at the fucking voting station when she was thrown out.
Okay,
a black woman, 92 years old. But I can show you that on film. I can show you the numbers. But when you start getting into this computer stuff,
both are possible.
Mars,
completely possible.
aliens,
Both are completely possible.
Bullshit. It's all about white people concerned
No,
about
it
their
isn't.
fucking white votes.
No, the computer
racist
people,
at
the
its
computer
core.
fraud against black people too. Computer fraud can be completely against black people too. It is nothing to do with.
That's
Okay,
not.
okay.
You know what? If you give me the evidence, I've seen it. This guy Spoonamore sent me. I said, "Give me some evidence." He told me that 10.6 million people were. He had evidence that 10.6 million people were purged from the voter rolls of South Carolina. There are only 8.6 million people, adults of voting age, who live in that state. So there was 120% purge of the voter rolls. Let's get rid of the nutcases who have no evidence, who don't know shit. And I don't like it because it's constantly taking the camera, the information, and the focus away from people of color getting fucked out of their vote.
But it has nothing to do with
no one gives a
racism.
shit about that. Instead, it's like, ooh, computer magic.
No, but I don't think it has anything to do with racism.
Trump was lying about it. Trump was lying about it, and anyone else, and it's still a lie 4 years later, whether it's a Democrat or Republican saying it.
Okay. All right, Donald, a point well taken. Thank you, Greg. Thank you. Stella Fair, we got a couple more minutes on this, and then we're going to go to Rob Elder. Stella Fair, go ahead.
Well, I didn't have a question. Greg had asked earlier if there was a black person among the however many participants there are here, and I just saying that I'm a black person and I'm from Texas.
Thank you, Stella. I'm glad to have you with
us. So that's all you need to know is I'm from Texas. I'm a black person from Texas.
In fact, I was in Texas with Commissioner Rodney Ellis, who is the first black commissioner elected, who was in charge of Harris County, which is Houston. Massive suppression of the black vote in Houston. Houston, by the way, as people don't know, has the largest black population of any city in America. And Rodney Ellis, Commissioner Ellis, he tried to allow people of color to vote in 2020 by allowing people to vote at drive-through 24/7 voting stations, and it was blocked by the state. And he was going to mail out ballots to every voter of Harris County, which is Houston, 2.4 million ballots. And as Ken Paxton, the Republican Secretary of, the Attorney General, the Attorney General Paxton said he stopped those 2.4 million ballots from going out to people in Houston during COVID. Remember, we're trying to get people to vote by mail so they don't die trying to vote. And Ken Paxton said, and you'll see this in Vigilantes, in my film Vigilantes Inc. Ken Paxton said, if it weren't for them stopping the people of Houston from voting, Donald Trump would have lost Texas. Texas is a blue state if you would let people of color vote there. If black people in Houston were given the same rights as other people in America to vote, that would be a blue state. And that's important to know. We still have to deal with racism in America in voting.
Right. Well, I will just say that if I had any exes, they would live in Texas. So thank you, Kinky Friedman, for that. Let's go to someone who hasn't spoken yet. Yona Patton, and then MYLA, and then Steve Caruso. Yona? You haven't been with us. We still have 130 some people with us. Go ahead, Yona.
Hi. Hey, this is my first time here. And I have to
Welcome.
say, I agree with Greg 100%. I called this from the beginning, this election. Trump cheated in 2016. He took the election from Hillary by cheating, by the way. In 2020, they have tapes of the man on the phone talking about, I only need so many more votes. Do you think this crazy son of a bitch isn't going to sit up there and cheat again? Come on. I blame our predicament to the Democrats because they're so dumb and stupid and naive. They took their eye off the ball. It wouldn't have made a difference who you would have put up against Trump. He's going to cheat his way in anyway. So you should have had your eye on the ball. The man shouldn't have been allowed to even run for office in the first place. If he had been a person of color, man or woman, they'd have had his ass up under the jail so long ago. There is no way they would have even considered him to run. This whole situation has pissed me off so badly. It's just unreal. And for the man talking about it ain't racism, you goddamn right it's racism. It's been racism from the beginning. Yeah, they don't give a shit. And especially you're talking about the Republicans. As far as I'm concerned, the mega Republicans are the United States terrorist group. They are a racist, anti-Semitic group and who is here to take over our government. And you let him do it. The Democrats let him do it. They saw him coming. They have a recognition problem, obviously. They don't recognize shit when it's hitting them in the damn face. They're too busy trying to be nice. Oh, yes.
Well, actually,
come on in.
you.
We don't care. What do you want to do with the free United States of America? Sure, we're going to hand it to you. It's like taking candy from a baby. They didn't have to be violent about it. All they got to do is ask you for it. And they gave it to them. What dumbass?
Well, I have to say, thank you, Yana. Let me just add something. In 2016, in fact, the other film you can see if you go to gregpalast.com for no charge is The Best Democracy Money Can Buy.
Mm-hmm.
And in that film, I go to Michigan, And I did this for Democracy Now!, the program, and I also did this for BBC television. I went to Michigan, and what I found out is that while Hillary Clinton officially lost by 10,000 votes, 75,000 ballots were disqualified in Detroit. 70, and they said, well, we don't know who they voted for. Well, who do you think the people in Detroit voted for? You think that they voted for Agent Orange? 75,000 ballots disqualified. And so when Jill Stein called for what people call a recount, it's completely misunderstood. There was no recount. It was about counting the 75,000 ballots which were discarded because Detroit had warned the city, had warned the state government that they had these old tabulator machines that would break down. And they knew they would break down beforehand. Now, again, I want to make a distinction. They're talking about tabulators which broke down and couldn't count the votes. That's how they do it. They don't do it by some guy in a cave changing the software. That's all Hollywood horseshit. What they do is they give African-American communities, poor communities, and really, if you really want to see vote suppression, just go to a reservation. Go to the Taos Pueblo. Go to the Pascua reservation in Arizona. Then you'll see real vote suppression because what they do is they give them terrible voting machines which simply break down. But you have to understand, they know that in Detroit, they know that on the reservations, these people are voting 90% Democrats. They don't have to have some fancy program switching your vote. They just know if the machine breaks down in that precinct, 90% of those votes would have gone Democratic. So this is what happened in Michigan in 2016. And I agree with you about where was the Democratic Party? Why was it Jill Stein who was calling for a recount of the Michigan votes? And the answer, so Donald Trump and his lawyers went to a state court in Lansing. Very few people know this story. They went to state court in Lansing and said, Jill Stein doesn't have the right. That is, she doesn't have standing is the fancy term. She doesn't have the right to bring a suit to count these ballots, which were never counted. Again, never counted from Detroit. She doesn't have the right to have those ballots counted because you can count them 100 times. Jill Stein ain't going to win. It'll be up. Only Hillary Clinton can ask for those ballots to be counted. Hillary Clinton's lawyers were in the courtroom, and the judge asked them, what does Secretary Clinton, remember she had been Secretary of State, what does Secretary Clinton want to do? Does she want these ballots counted? And her lawyer said, and I quote, "We are only here to observe." That's what she said about counting black ballots. They're not her ballots. They're the people of Detroit. It was their ballots. How dare she say, don't count those ballots? And that's why the Democratic Party lost in 16, and that's why they lost in 2024, because people don't think that the rulers, that the ruling class, no matter what their party, gives a damn about low-income voters. And that's just the damn truth.
Okay, Greg, stick with us. MYLA RESON, you had your hand up for a while. Then we're going to go to Steve Caruso, Paul Newman, and ROB KALL. Go ahead, MYLA, real quick, please.
Thank you. I don't know that I haven't heard a reminder that we're not supposed to be using 4-letter words because of possible rebroadcasts, but it's kind of late for that reminder.
Beat me.
At any rate,
Okay.
And Steve Caruso is cheering me on because he will be the one who will have to go through and edit all of the FUCKs out of the.
Oh, you'll have to get rid of this too.
Okay. At any rate,
Marla, that's another one he has to cut out too. You can't spell it either.
Oh, well, that's good to know. At any rate, let me say this. I think it is what a lot of people on the who are looking at the anomalies of the voting machines are saying is that there's a kind of a catch-22. What they're looking for is an ability to audit those votes that were cast and to see whether or not, in order to be able to prove what you say has not been proven. It has not been proven because they haven't had the ability to audit. Greg, I think it's kind of divisive to accuse all of those folks of being racist. I, for one, if you want to call me a racist, I would like to see, I agree with all of that voter suppression, your points, that is, as Mike Hirsch said, the main event, and it's really important. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also verify every election, whether or not whether there are anomalies or not. It should be standard that we audit the election so that we can verify that that nothing is being flipped. You do not have proof, Greg.
I do. In Georgia, they hand counted every single ballot twice. And Trump was wrong. Trump was wrong about Dominion systems, and Trump was wrong about the electronic vote. They literally hand counted 5 million votes twice.
They set the table for what is occurring now by going through that exercise. You don't have proof that in this election something.
Look, I'm an investigator. See the hat? I'm an investigative reporter. You show me the evidence, I'll take it. But they didn't remove 10 points. It's real.
We're gonna have to
zero evidence, and every time the ballots. This is not how you steal votes. I know how you steal white votes, but how you win elections is by removing black votes. And
absolutely, 100%. But that doesn't. The two things can both be true, and we do not have the proof yet on this election.
And not having the proof, for me, I'm an investigative reporter. I have the proof on the number of voters of color. I can give you the numbers. I can give you the names. First of all, this is very important. This is very important. When I said that people were illegally removed from the voter rolls of Georgia and illegally removed from the voter rolls of Wisconsin, I literally handed in to the state officials the names and addresses of the voters who were wrongly removed from the voter rolls. 340,134 voters. I gave the names and addresses. And instead, I'm hearing now, oh, there could be, there might be, you don't know. Cut the crap. We either have evidence or we don't have evidence. And you don't have any goddamn evidence of this bullshit with the computers. And don't tell me, oh, because I don't have evidence that's false. Yeah, I do. Yes, I do. Donald Trump was dead fucking wrong. Eat that. Donald Trump was, believe it or not,
You're
I don't
right,
even believe this,
Greg.
but Donald Trump was wrong saying
Greg,
that
you're right.
the computers
Greg,
were fixed.
Greg, you are right about the last election.
Okay.
Oh, so the last election, computers didn't have any effect, but in this election, they did. No.
Okay.
Without evidence, I ain't buying it. It's racist. It's racist.
Okay, all right.
It's racist.
You made your point, and Myla, you made your point. I don't think we're going to come to a conclusion here. We'll take this up again next week.
There's horse shit and there's reality.
Okay.
I have a list of 340,134 voters. I give the name and address. What voters had their ballots changed by the computers?
It's
Give me
not
their names.
mutually. It's not
Give me
mutually.
their names. Give me their names. I do the work.
Greg,
it takes
Greg,
years
hear
of
me
work.
out. Greg,
Years.
hear me out.
It's not mutually
I've heard you
exclusive.
out. You don't know
We
what
have
the
one
fuck you're talking
final
about.
statement.
I really don't. I really don't
It's
care what
not
you think.
mu- it's not
No.
mu-
I don't
Okay,
care what you
Greg.
think.
Don't shout people
I'm interested in evidence. Evidence is the only thing
All
I
right,
care
Myla,
about.
You're interested in shouting people down
let
and
it
not
go.
letting them speak.
Marla, we
Okay.
can't talk over each other. Everybody's made their point. We're not
No, I
changing
haven't.
minds
I
here.
haven't. I
All right,
have
go
not
ahead. Make your
responded.
Myla,
I've
make your
shot-
point, and we'll move to Paul Newman, Steve Caruso, and then Paul, and then Rob, and then Melissa, and then Hetty, and then we're gonna go. Oh my God.
Real quick, because we're 7 minutes late, and
Okay.
a friend of mine has agreed to speak, and he's already
Okay.
on
Go
hold.
ahead,
So
Myla. Myla, finish.
My point is that the things are not mutually exclusive, and that we have to audit. And thank you. And we want to hear from Rob Cole. Is that your friend? So thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Myla. It was very well taken, and Greg, your points are well taken too. So let's move ahead. Steve Caruso, you wanted to jump in, and then we got Paul and Rob.
Yeah, very slim margin. Trump didn't actually get the majority of the votes in the country, and the very slim margin between him and Harris was almost negligible. So what Greg's point he's making is very legitimate. That's part of the picture. And then what about the Romanians? Big topic. They're having a revote on the election because some people were getting bribed. Well, that happened here. Thanks.
That's it's in Romania, also in Georgia, not America, Georgia, the one over in the former Soviet Union. So thank you for that, Steve. Paul Newman, Rob Call,
I'll be
Melissa
quick.
Eddy, and then we're going to go to Mike's friend but go ahead, Paul Newman, please.
First of all, I just want to say GREG PALAST is the most courageous investigative reporter I have ever seen. I mean, he walks in the den of wolves. Okay. So, and that being said,
I got to tell you, Paul, his real name is Clark Kent, but we won't.
But anyway, besides that, he cited a lot of stuff from his film. And my question was it specifically exclusive to Georgia? And he already answered Wisconsin also. But I was wondering if Michigan was also, did you look at Michigan as well? And it was the same story. You're muted.
Oh, Greg, you're muted for some reason, but you're expressive. We can tell you're speaking.
Yes,
All right, go ahead.
thank you. So I like to get super dramatic. Apologies to all those people get offended, but I like to make a point and make it dramatically. But I want to tell you, I'm just really struggling because I'm trying to get these numbers out of these states. It's very hard for me to report unless I have the numbers, and they're not telling me how many people were shunted to provisional ballots. Like I said, 4 years ago, it was 10 million. So how many this time? And 2.7 million were rejected. But I need the numbers. I'm trying to get them. How many absentee ballots were mailed in? They said, oh, they're disqualified. How many votes were so-called spoiled? How many voters showed up and were told to scram because you've been purged? this is the worst election in terms of just getting info. And I'd love to tell you about Michigan, but we've literally talked to the Secretary of State of Michigan several times. He put in open records requests. We're trying to get that information. It's really hard for me to report unless I've got the data. But thank you for asking.
Sure.
I'll get there.
Thank you for what you do.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you both. And MYLA, thank you for raising your issues. Rob Kall, Melissa and Hedy and Steve, and then we're going to Pat Elder. Go ahead, Rob Kall, please. And Rob, keep up your Op Ed News. We really appreciate it.
And Op Ed News would love to publish any kind of articles as you discussed earlier, too. Greg, you're an American hero. I love you. Thank you so much for what you do.
You're welcome.
This election demonstrated the most profound level of failure and incompetence by the Democratic leadership that I think we've ever seen. And they also assured us that they had the election issues covered, which was a total lie. So my question is, I want to hear a little bit of your spleen about the Democratic leadership, about what they didn't do, what they should do, and what we need to demand them to do to make this better.
Okay. So just very quickly. So I went into court as an expert witness because, again, I'm a former professor of statistics. So I went into court with the NAACP, with Rainbow Push, with Jesse Jackson's organization, and Black Voters Matter Fund, and the leadership, pretty much the major leadership of Georgia's voting rights movement, to try to get people back on the ballot. There were 198,000 people who we could identify by name and address who were wrongly purged from the voter rolls of Georgia. Where was the Democratic Party?
Nowhere.
Like, we didn't get an amicus brief. We didn't get nothing. Like, well, where are they? I mean, come on, let's face it. Those 198,000 voters were not exactly MAGA. We know who was removed. So, yeah, so the Democratic Party was missing in action in those lawsuits. In Michigan, the Democratic Secretary of State had I had a website where it said, if you're removed from the voter rolls, look your name up and here's how you re-register. The Secretary of State of Michigan, is a Democrat, had my site shut down until she was informed by the ACLU, like, hey, Palast is saving Democratic voters. But, it's not my job to save Democrats. I'm nonpartisan, and yes, you think that the Democratic Party would really care about these issues. And I have to tell you that the Reverend Jesse Jackson, met with Biden and met with Kamala Harris a couple weeks before the election and said, listen, you've got to watch Greg Palast's film Vigilantes, and you've got to take some action. And Kamala's response to Reverend Jackson was, well, when I'm elected, the first thing I'm going to do is pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And as he kindly pointed out to her, well, if you don't deal with these issues like these vigilante challenges, you ain't getting elected. So you can forget the John Lewis Act. You got to do something. So literally, Jesse Jackson tried to get Biden and Harris personally to take this on. It's like, well, it's like urinating up a rope.
Is there?
Well, I will point out that as you well know, in 2004, we briefed John Kerry's people inside and out about what had been done in Ohio, and he heard it, and he went windsurfing. And I'm sure that Kamala is somewhere very nice. We haven't heard a word from her.
I was with John Edwards when Kerry conceded. John Edwards, if you remember, was the vice presidential candidate with John Kerry. And Edwards was shocked out of his mind because Kerry didn't tell him, I'm conceding. And he says, but we haven't counted all the votes in Ohio. They're knocking out voters in Ohio. We have to challenge this. We are basically turning our backs on the Black community if we don't demand a full count of the vote in Ohio. So yes, it's been, it's very difficult. Though later, John Kerry said when he was asked about my book, he said, "Oh, there's a very good chapter in my book, Our Madhouse, about the election." Because what Kerry didn't mention, which he did like the book because it was called Kerry Won.
Well,
but it's hard. The Democrats, they're like why people always ask, why don't Democrats stand up? For the same reason jellyfish don't stand up. You have to have a backbone.
Well, there's more, I'm sure. Anyway, we spent all this time working for voting rights in elections and the Democrats are nowhere. Not only they're nowhere to be seen, but they attack us. We were never attacked in Ohio 2004 by the Republicans. It was always the Democrats who attacked us for questioning the outcome of the
don't
elections.
Forget something. Let me just bring something up that's kind of obvious, but I think it's very important. The current Democratic Party officials are elected by the current roster of voters. If you were to make it easier to vote, you would completely change the voter rolls and the demographics of who votes in America. And the current Democrats, remember, the current politicians it's the party of incumbency. If you change the voter rolls radically, let everyone vote and count every vote, you're going to have a very different Democratic Party, I can assure you.
Okay. Melissa Richardson, and then Hedy, Stephen Hoffman, and then we're going to go to Pat Elder. Melissa, go ahead, please. And then Hedy, I'll unmute you. Go ahead, Melissa.
I had a question for Greg Palast and everybody here. First of all, it's kind of two short ones. Do you think we're being played by both parties? When the Reverend Jackson,
absolutely. We are absolutely being played by both parties. Very well stated. And what's your other question?
And I am disabled, and I don't like being. I started questioning when the Kennedys left in 2014 because they didn't like the direction. And in your opinion, Greg, what can people with challenges do to advocate for themselves so they're listened to?
Well, we're ever searching for that. If we had a good answer, we probably would be. Our meetings would be shorter.
Well, I have to tell you that the Americans for Disability Act, which was supposed to make it easier for people with physical problems to vote, that the GOP, interestingly, has used the ADA to radically reduce the number of voting stations by saying, well, they're not ADA compliant. And in these low-income communities, rural communities throughout America, they're shutting down polling stations saying they're not ADA compliant. Well, just a second. Now you've just taken a person who now can't go to their local polling station, may have a wheelchair or other issue that they have to deal with, and now they got to go 20 miles. So what's happening in America is that the abuse of the ADA to not help people with disabilities to vote, but actually blocks them from voting. So it's an issue. I mean, there's so many we are the only nation within the OECD, which is what we would call the so-called advanced nations. We are literally the only nation among the OECD where people have to go through a damn obstacle course to vote, to register to vote, to get their ballot, to have it counted, to cast their ballot. No one, I mean, when I'm in Europe, people are like stunned. I was just in Switzerland. They don't even have voter registration. They assume you just show up to vote, that you're not some type of criminal from Guatemala. If you're showing up to vote, you're a citizen, right? And again, we're not, it's this whole issue of voter fraud, which is being used to actually, where you're talking about disability, to literally make it harder for people with disabilities to vote. Why would we do that? Only America does that. It's sick. It's wrong. And that's why I'm saying we need to reestablish the voting rights movement.
Harvey, you're muted.
Hedy Tripp, and then Steve Hoffman, and then we can go to Pat Elder. Hedy, thank you, and Steve, you're next.
Thanks, Greg. I've been following with interest how the R word is being triggered by a whole lot of other people. But, and by the way, my husband, who is African-American, and he's a professor and teaches race in America, said, "You're pretty sharp." So that's pretty good from him. He was also
Better than me. Thank you.
He was also
Thank
a
you.
Black Panther in Detroit as an education minister. But anyway, that's big compliment from him. But also, you know, it's white supremacy, and that is the conservative white nationalists that are part of Trump's entourage that is making use of the institutionalized racism in America, and they are using it to the hilt. So I continue to watch with interest, and thank you for your analysis, Greg.
Yes,
Well-
thank you very much. Christian nationalism has been a tremendously damaging new force in America that had a huge amount to do with the outcome of this election. It's a
Right.
really serious issue that we have to deal with.
And you
Thank you
should
for bringing it
all
up.
you should all read Greg's piece on Elon Musk. As Greg points out, Elon Musk is actually a South African American, and his grandfather was a horrendous anti-Semite. I would like to. I Googled it. I couldn't find anything. Greg, if you can find something that Elon Musk had to say about Nelson Mandela, I bet it'll be very interesting.
Well, we do know that Musk is an Afrikaner. Not every Afrikaner is a pro-apartheid racist, but it's clear that he talks with about his brilliant grandfather who was a major supporter of the apartheid regime, serious racist. Go to gregpalast.com, see the Elon Musk article. His
Right.
father made his money from emerald mines in South Africa. And, you know, as you know, from especially the pre-Mandela world, and even now, miners, emerald miners, precious stone miners, they're virtually enslaved. It's really
Right.
sick. And this is what Elon Musk comes from, and this is what he promotes and supports. And I wouldn't care, except that this guy is totally, as my article points out, his third of $1 trillion net worth is 100% from sticking his nose in the public trough. It's all government arranged wealth. That's what his deal is. And, you know, that's an important issue, because we now have the Elon Musk government. Believe me,
Right.
Donald Trump is not running nothing. He's a glove puppet, and it's Musk and other billionaires who have their fingers in the gloves.
Stephen Hoffman, and then we can go to Pat Elder. Stephen, go ahead.
Thank you, Greg. That last comment was really appropriate. I just have something technical to add about SQL databases. Both ES&S and Dominion run them, and all of the all the hardware that's collecting the information and tabulating it have SQL databases, which do have a flaw, but they do have something which you can use to discover if any anomalies have been injected, like SQL injection. And it's called the audit log. Every time transactions are put into the databases, they create logs in an audit file, which, if used properly, can be used to discover unauthorized transactions. Getting a hold of those logs is really like pulling hen's teeth. We have FOIA coming here. So there's no data that I can point to. But if you gave me access to those audit logs practically anywhere, I could show you data. And if we do come up with something, I'd be happy to put it on your desk.
Well, Steve, email me. I'll forward it to Greg. And you sound great. It's very good to hear from you. Greg, you've created a lot of work for poor Steve Caruso, but you've been a great guest. And we have 120 people still with us. We are the Zoom call in America with the longest attention span. And we will be back next week. hopefully to celebrate freeing Leonard Peltier, but we're going to meet certainly through January 20th, or at least until he's freed. I don't feel right taking time off while he's still under the gun here. Greg, you're great. Thank you so much. MYLA RESON,
Very welcome
for raising your point.
And I just want to let you know, I'm so strident and I get over the top for a good reason. I want to kind of shock people into rethinking how you think now. So apologies if it seems strident, but I want you to know that we have a lot of work to do. We got to redo this voting rights movement. And the last speaker who said, let's look at some of the evidence. That's what I want to see. I'm happy to do that. Right now, we have a serious issue about counting the votes in America. And I'd love to report to you the results, but I still got to get the data so I can.
We'll come back next. We'll talk through the week, Greg, and come back next week. We'll give us a report.
Give me a couple of weeks to try to find this. I really got to get the data. Okay, thank you so much.
And we'll celebrate the freeing of Leonard Peltier, God willing. All right, thank you so much. Wow, amazing! What an amazing session, Pat Elder. Thank you so much, Greg, again. And let me know where I can get a hat like that, will you? But I don't know if I'm worthy to wear it at this point. Pat Elder, you've been waiting very, very patiently. We're going to go to 4:20 at least to give you time to speak. It's great. And MYLA RESON, by the way, thank you for standing up. Much appreciated. You're always right on the case here. So Pat Elder, Mike Hirsch, will you introduce Pat Elder, please? And we want to hear from you, Pat. I know you've got some really important issues to deal with. I want to thank Steve Caruso, and I know he grimaced every time Greg left fly, but we'll deal with it. Mike Hirsch, can you introduce Pat Elder, please?
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's an honor to introduce my good friend, Pat Elder. I'm not sure exactly when Pat and I met. It seems like we've known each other forever. And as long as I've known Pat, he's been finding, as GREG PALAST very calmly explained, hard evidence, not just conjecture, not stuff that, I feel like, I get a migraine every time a jet plane goes by or whatever, not the anecdotes, but the hard evidence. And I just really off the top of my head, I remember Pat working on protecting high school students from being channeled into the military through a version of the poverty draft and getting the state of Maryland to prevent public schools from forcing our children to take tests that would then set them up to be recruited behind their parents' back into the military. And Pat, I will always thank you from the bottom of my heart for saving countless children from being hoodwinked and lied to be forced into the draft. But that's just scratching the surface. Pat has also been looking into a wide range of environmental toxins and threats to our health that almost nobody reports on. And again, hard evidence, the facts. Pat knows what he's talking about, and I can't wait to hear what you've uncovered. So thank you so much, Pat, for everything.
Okay, Pat, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mike. I need to share my screen. So it's a little green square at the bottom. It says share. Will that do it?
That should.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and do that there. Yep.
Make sure it's full slideshow. Don't do the preview stuff.
Let's
full
see
screen.
what we have here.
I can do it for you if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Start talking, please.
Okay. Are you going to put my PowerPoint up there?
But remember, you're on radio also, because there you go.
Okay, that'll work. And then I'll just have you change my screen there. So yeah, thanks, Mike, for your introduction. Kind of worked pragmatically, a revolutionary to the core. And I spent, 10 or 20 years trying to put people on the streets in DC, and we managed to get a couple 100,000, and it really didn't do a whole lot of good. So I shifted gears to trying to, keep the military out of public schools, and that was a measurable failure as well. And so I shifted again about almost 8 years ago now to military contamination. And I heard Pat Hines, who was the EPA Woman of the Year a few years back, give a talk in Kaiserslautern, Germany. I was on a panel talking about the JERRY program and the lead, that comes out of the rifles in high schools in Germany and in 2,200 high schools here. And so she mentioned PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. And I had never heard of that. She talked about burn pits. And, that opened me up to, a different way of activism. So let me go through these slides right quickly. What you see on the left is a photo of Piscataway Creek, which flows out of Joint Base Andrews, about 8 miles south of Washington, D.C. in Maryland. And this creek actually flows by the fire training facility, where they have a 200-foot diameter crater. And they fill that crater up, at least they used to, with jet fuel. And they would light a giant fire. And then there'd be 6 or 8 men, usually, with that kind of looked like Ghostbusters, that would put the flames out with these foamy suds, which we call them AFFF, or aqueous film forming foam. And that stuff permeates into the groundwater and then into the surface water. So I tested the water there on the left where it flows out of Joint Base Andrews and found 3,000 parts per trillion of PFAS in the water. And I prodded the Maryland Department of the Environment to do the same, and damned if they didn't come up with 3,100 parts per trillion of PFOS, mostly in the water. So again, PFAS is per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. So long story short, if you look at the map on the right, that is the blue line represents Piscataway Creek. It's 8 miles from where the creek leaves the perimeter of Joint Base Andrews and flows into the tidal waters of the Potomac River 8 miles south of Washington. So in a nutshell, the state, after our organizing, tested a fish in that tidal portion of Piscataway Creek and found 94,200 parts per trillion of PFOS in the fillet, 94,200. And they allow people to eat it, and there's no regulation. Meanwhile, the Biden administration has set a mandatory limit of 4 parts per trillion of PFOS in drinking water. So it's okay to eat the fish. The stuff is a killer, and it destroys the developing embryo, the developing fetus during the first trimester. So, women who are pregnant or may become pregnant, ought to be told not to eat that fish. Next slide, please.
So, go ahead.
There we go. Yeah, thanks. So we have been working on this issue for quite some time. The military would, have these burn pits and then put them out with this aqueous film forming foam all across the country and all around the world. And I have tested waters in 400 locations in the U.S. and in UK, Ireland, Germany, Japan, to basically get across the point that if you have X amount of this PFAS in the water, then your fish is going to be poisoned. Next slide, please. This may be a little bit much, and you're going to have to kind of like switch from your left brain to your right brain in order to grasp this, especially after that last tirade. But if you look on the left side,
well, just tell us, please, because not everybody can see.
Yeah,
so
okay,
just
that's
paraphrase
fine.
it, please.
Well, the left side shows the water I tested by Piscataway Creek having 2,700 parts per trillion. And on the right, the water has 234 parts per trillion. That's where the fish was caught. So the fish was caught in waters with 234 parts per trillion. The fish has 94,000. Next slide, please. And I'll hurry it up. So here's a young woman who's pregnant with a fish caught by the banks of Piscataway Creek. Again, 94 parts per trillion, 94,000 parts per trillion, and you can eat it. Next slide, please. I should mention that the European Food Safety Authority says that 86% of the PFAS in our bodies is from food. It's not from the water. It's from mostly the fish. So I just want to quickly go through 10 different ways that PFAS is used on U.S. bases, which make the majority of the problem. Next slide, please. So obviously, you have the fire training areas, and for 50 years, the military filled up these giant reservoirs and with jet fuel, and then doused them with AFFF. The chemicals are still there. They don't go away, and that's the thing that people can't get their heads around. The stuff doesn't go away. It's carcinogenic. It'll kill us, and it'll kill us in 10,000 years. It doesn't decompose. Next slide, please. So, I mean, they're idiots for using the stuff. We knew back in the 40s it was dangerous. The Navy and the Army and the Air Force knew very clearly in the late 60s that it was deadly to the liver. And yet, if you have an F-35 that's worth $90 million, you want to put the fire out quickly. And that's the thing about this stuff. PFAS will put out a fire better than anything ever developed. It will also repel grease better than anything. So all of the jet engines and mechanics are clean with the stuff. And it will also repel water better than anything. So you can only imagine the military applications. They just love this stuff. So, and their hangars are filled with suppression systems, and they go off. Almost every hangar ever made with the suppression system has misfired. And I really think there are only about a half a dozen actual fires around the world in the last 10 years in these hangars, and we've had hundreds of mishaps. Next slide, please. I think another major source of the problem is, you remember Erin Brockovich and her, hexachromium,
right,
and it's the chemical that it coats metal parts with chrome. And in order to do this, you need PFAS to pour into the tanks. It kind of creates a cloud to cover the suppression, which is carcinogenic. So a ton of the stuff is used at all military facilities. And at the end of the day, they pull the plug and it goes out into the wastewater treatment plant. Next slide. Okay. Wash rack, same deal. Nothing cleans better. And so they just clean the F-35s on these wash racks. And so this is a picture of Eglin Air Force Base that has 552,000 parts per trillion of PFOS almost entirely. And again, you're only supposed to have 4 parts per trillion in groundwater. Next slide, please. The stuff goes into the drains in hangars, and they're carried out to wastewater treatment plants. Next slide. Now, this is a huge one, and this is not just military. This is, of course, your landfills near you. But if you think of a giant coffee maker and all of the garbage is crushed, with those giant bulldozers, and they pulverize the stuff into the ground, and the rain and the snow comes kind of like a giant coffee maker, and what's left underneath is leachate. And in a lot of places, it's just allowed to go into the groundwater, which seeps into the surface water, which then goes and contaminates the food chain, starting with the sediment and the invertebrates, and then the small fish, which are eaten by the large fish. So leachate is a big deal. Next slide, please. Wastewater treatment plants don't treat for PFAS. You have 2 products. You have the sludge, and then you have the liquid effluent. The sludge is spread on agricultural fields, and getting back to one of my first points, which was that, most of the PFAS in our body is from the food we eat. And so we have this stuff being spread all over agricultural fields. And then, of course, the leachate liquid is drained into the rivers. Next slide, please. This is a really important slide, and I was part of the Restoration Advisory Board meeting. It's kind of a dog and pony show put on by the Navy, and I actually captured this picture from their presentation. But there's a fire training area up at the top left. Down at the bottom right, 600 feet from there is the Chesapeake Bay. The stream passes by the wastewater treatment plant, and it picks up PFAS from the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
Is that it?
No, but speed it up if you would, please. We're almost
Well,
out.
hell, go. I thought I had 20 minutes, but go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Next slide.
Yeah, we can keep going a little bit late.
No, it's all right, you
This
guys.
is important stuff.
Just a real important point here on Martinsburg, West Virginia. The results here of dust in houses outside of the base. See, the stuff coats the creek banks, and the creeks dry up a little bit, and they get lifted into the air. And so this is actually nanograms per gram. So
Let me ask you, is this stuff in the fire retardant that they pour out of the helicopters
No.
on forest fires?
No.
Okay.
No, these are
All right.
type B, Class B fires.
Okay,
Class B
okay.
fires are petroleum-based fires.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you got 13,900,000 parts per trillion of PFOS in dust. So we have, children that are developing cancer at really young ages. It's in dust, so, the toddlers are crawling around. Next slide, please.
Okay, so
PFAS comes from incineration as well. If you have a coat that is coated with the stuff, or a couch and it gets burned, we have results from 20 miles downwind that shows carcinogenic levels in fish. Next slide, please. Airstripping towers basically will try to clean water, but they do for certain compounds, but not for PFAS. Next slide. So the fish are much more contaminated than the water. The EPA estimates that the levels of PFOS in water will accumulate times 4,000 in the fillet of fish. They only need a couple parts per trillion. Next slide, please. This will give you an idea. None of these fish are regulated. You see the concentrations into millions of parts per trillion for this just PFOS, yet the water is regulated at 4. Next slide.
Let me read these. Black crappie, bluegill, brown trout, carp, channel catfish, large whitefish, largemouth bass, northern pike, cumpenseed, rainbow trout, rock bass, smallmouth bass, walleye, white sucker, and yellow perch. All these fish have large quantities of this stuff in it, right?
Everything does.
Everything does. Okay.
Everything does. The sediment's coated with the stuff. The invertebrates are covered with the stuff. So you got a problem. One quick point. Michigan tested 2,600 fish 3 years ago. The average fish had 80,000 parts per trillion. Next slide, please. And here you have the regulations that are currently in effect, but they're in parts per billion. So if you look at Maine, which is one of the least unresponsible states, that's really 60,000 parts per trillion for PFOS. I think that's it. Is there another slide?
Well, so, and then in Alabama, there's 800. So
Yeah.
what you're telling us is that this is a pollutant that we've really got to deal with. And those of us who eat fish, we got to be really careful. And, it's bad stuff. Thank you. What's the name of it again? PFAS. I've read it. What does it stand for? PFOS.
PFAS, it's per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. There are 16,000 of them. PFOS is just one. And it's in your air, it's in your dust, it's in your food.
Wow, and you're getting great compliments here in the chat. What do you want to tell us as a parting message?
Things are going to get worse under the Trump administration.
Yeah.
Can we share this on the website?
I have a website. It's militarypoisons.org.
No, can we share it on your slideshow on ours?
Absolutely. Yeah, I
Sure.
was
Thank you.
in Japan the last couple of years, and in Germany, I've done. I guess I've been in about 40 cities in the last 2 years. I was on Chinese Communist Party TV yesterday and last week. 190 million people, but they don't love me here.
Well, we love you.
Oh,
And
well, good. That's
it's a great
Thank you.
presentation, Pat. Thank you very much. Thank
Yeah.
you for bringing Pat to us. Publish your website and all that other stuff, your links in the chat. We
Sure.
really need it. We really appreciate it. And this stuff has got to stop, you know.
Yeah, well, it's not going to stop. There's nothing we can do really. But we need to take care of ourselves. Really, you got to
Well,
watch
we've got
what
to
you
find
eat.
a way to stop it, you know. And you know, it reminds me of when we were fighting the nuclear power plant. Many of them, nobody said we could stop them, and we did. Anybody want to see our own movie about stopping the rise of the nuclear power movement? Email me, and I'll send you what we call the Naked Hippie movie, which is called Far Out, about life on the commune. And the last half hour of this 85-minute documentary documents the rise of the no nukes movement. And Pat, it seems like you're also turning into something we need to stop. Thank you so much. Very quickly, we've got 3 hands here. Doug Krakow, Rhonda Roth. I know you, Rhonda, from Florida, and then Mike Hirsch. They'll give you the last word. Doug, go ahead. Doug? Yeah, go ahead. Oh my God, you're muted. Hold on.
Doug, unmute yourself, please.
I'm trying. Go ahead,
There we
Miss
go.
Doug. I'm going to unmute you.
In the
Ron.
email,
Go ahead, Doug.
okay, should I talk now? Okay.
Yeah, go.
In the email, I was, but you talked over me. So in the email for this Zoom call, you mentioned water fluoridation. Are you going to get to that subject matter today or not?
We don't have an expert to talk about. I'd love to talk about water fluoridation next week. If you've got somebody that can come on with us who really knows their stuff. I knew a guy in Ohio named John Yamayanis. He was a dentist.
Yeah, I knew him.
Well, if you can present
how about if I present? Can I do that?
Yes, join us next week and present about fluoride. I'd love to hear about it. I'm sure we all would.
Okay, I will.
So email me and give us your link, and we'll get you a time next week. Okay? To talk, we need to talk about fluoridation.
And Harvey, I have someone too, an expert who can talk.
Oh, all right, let's do it. Let's do it. But everybody next week, bring a toothbrush, okay? Rhonda Roth, go ahead, and then Mike, you get the last word.
Sure. I just wanted to ask a question. Recently, we've been fighting incinerators in Florida. We have more incinerators than any other state. I think there are 11 working right now. And the expert on incineration talked about PFAS being emitted, falling by air deposition to the grass, which the cows eat, and it gets bioaccumulated very heavily in the beef and especially in the dairy products that we make from cows. So, and it's disproportionately bioaccumulated by that process compared to humans, say, eating vegetables which are grown and also have PFAS air deposition on them, just because of the volume of vegetation that cows eat. And I was wondering if Pat had any thoughts on that.
Absolutely. I'm preparing legislation right now for a couple states, but in particular Hawaii, and I have a call, in 10 more minutes with a committee with the Democratic Party in Hawaii to to talk about that. I think one angle is that they will talk about prevailing winds, but prevailing winds won't prevail, more than 2 or 3 days of the week. So that's an important indicator. Another is there probably have been studies that have shown, exactly where the PFAS is deposited from the smokestacks. It has a lot to do with the wind speed and the height of the smokestack. It's a real thing, and it is killing Florida. I have tested, a great deal in Florida. You've got oysters with 500,000 parts per trillion. You've got beef and seafood completely contaminated. And you have real correlations between the food that people are eating and liver and kidney cancers in Florida. Big deal.
Thank you. Just curious, are you working with Mike Ewald?
In Florida.
Energy justice out of DC.
I am not, but what's his name again? I'm sorry.
Oh, I can share it with you
Yeah, just share
online.
it. Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you. And you know, trash burning power plants, which everybody initially thought was a good idea, really spread a lot of this stuff, especially dioxins and
Furans. Yeah.
because they burn plastic. We defeated a trash burner in Columbus, Ohio, but not before my mother died of leukemia, which I
There.
always think came from that trash burner.
Yeah.
Mike, thank you, Rhonda. Mike Hirsch.
Yeah, thanks so much, Pat, especially for being patient and for speeding up your presentation. It's sure packed a wallop. And I'd like to underscore that people who are listening and weren't able to see the slideshow, if you go to the website, militarypoisons.org, all one word, to the .org, go there. You can find the slideshow and a whole lot of excellent articles. And I want to thank you so much, Pat, because we live in a very militarized society. It's an imperial nation that we're living in. And because of that, the military is inflicting all kinds of damage on people, whether it's tricking young people into through recruitment, or whether it's mass poisoning, or whether it's using massive amounts of oil and gas and dumping carbon pollution into the air, or releasing bioagents like Lyme disease. And thank you so much, Pat, because we have to keep an eye on this. And I also want to underscore that the threat of nuclear energy is driven by the need by some to keep replenishing our nuclear arsenal, which only is a gun held to our own heads. If we have a nuclear exchange, then we can kiss life on this planet goodbye. So it's all entangled, and it's up to us to stand up from inside the belly of the beast to call attention to this and shut it down. We have to shut it down before it shuts us down.
The belly of the beast is about to ingest a major toxin. Thank you, Pat Elder. Thank you, everybody. After at 2.5 hours, we still have 84 people with us. We love you all. We will be back next week. We will be desperately trying to get Leonard Peltier to breathe, as has Julian Assange. No nukes, everybody. We'll see you in Solartopia. Thanks again, Pat, everybody. Steve Caruso, our fabulous engineer, MYLA. Everybody, we'll see you next week. No nukes.
Thank you.
Take care.
No nukes.
Thanks so much, Pat. No nukes, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. See you next week. And thank you, GREG PALAST, for being so passionate.
I wish he would tell us what he really thinks.
Well, he did, and he's given us some great stories. And everybody else, you are all great. And we'll see you next week and celebrate Leonard Peltier being free.